We have Starbucks. Okay, so we have people here and people on a YouTube link at the same time, right? And so we just started the live feed on the YouTube video. This is
They have a way to submit questions to you.
um, we'll look into that. Maybe we could open up like a poll everywhere or something like that. I'll ask.
I don't know, just some way, even a text or whatever, where they probably all have your phone number. So just some way for the YouTube people if they want to ask a question.
Right. Okay. We'll definitely look into that right now. In the meantime, I'm just going to introduce you both. So, for those of you who don't know, this is Thilo and Anastasia Young. They wrote an amazing book. If you guys ever get the chance, you should definitely read it. It's called My American Flight to Egypt. Sorry, guys, I didn't memorize the title. My American Flight to Egypt, a Western Evangelical Discovers the Ancient Faith. Awesome book, definitely worth a read. If anybody's interested, those of you who are here or those of you who are online, just message me. I'll definitely tell you how to get a hold of that book. Definitely worth a read if you get a chance, for sure. And if you guys don't mind, could you lead us into prayers?
Name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, bless us. Amen. Lord, make us worthy to pray with all thanksgiving. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one, through Christ Jesus our Lord. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Awesome. I would assume that most people haven't gotten the opportunity to read the book, but we're definitely going to get some copies out there. I was just talking to you, Thilo, before we started about getting it to a few bookstores here. In the meantime, without completely ruining the book, right, because that wouldn't be ideal, of course, could you give us, like, just a little bit of your story? Both of you, of course.
Well, it's basically comprised of three sections. The first section is my whole background, starting in a kind of a messed up, dysfunctional home, growing up in Mormonism, and then becoming an atheist, and then an evangelical Christian, and then encountering the early church, and setting forth a methodology to determine which is the authentic religion, beliefs, and practices that the apostles delivered. And it goes all the way up through baptism. And then the second section is Anastasia's. We're talking about them. This is John.
I don't know his name. I wanted to address it by name.
John.
John. Okay. I didn't want to. So
what were you asking us to tell our actual story?
No, that's what the book is.
What were you asking?
Just a quick synopsis of the book without completely ruining the book for those who want to read it.
Basically what he said. This starts with our growing up. And because it lays a foundation for our decisions and how we walked in different faiths up until discovering Coptic Orthodoxy. Then mine goes in a little bit after my baptism, and it's still an adjustment period, kind of being Protestant in mind, but Coptic in theology. So there's still some work to be done there, and there still is. So that's my portion of the book.
And then the third section, it's kind of written from the point of view of now and assessing certain things from a present point of view. So there's why I've come to appreciate Coptic Orthodoxy in particular. See, I guess I could put it this way. I believe there's a God because many things are just not properly explained without a personal, moral, and intelligent deity. And I believe Jesus Christ is that God because I believe the resurrection to be a absolutely verifiable to an acceptable level of proof historical event, not even a religious belief, but a historical event that he rose from the dead. I believe orthodoxy is the proper expression of Christianity, and I believe Coptic Orthodoxy is a wonderful flavor of orthodoxy. So with that in mind, I go into why I appreciate Coptic Orthodoxy. And much of that, sorry kids, is about your elders. And they're primarily the reason why I absolutely love and embrace Coptic Orthodoxy. I think you guys are great too, but I'd rather be in a midweek Arabic liturgy with the old people who have the spirit of Coptic Orthodoxy in a very thick way that I don't think not growing up under persecution can produce. There are other things that can produce that may even be better in our culture, but that spirit is something that's kind of baked in a fire. And then I do a lot of comparative between evangelicalism / Protestantism and orthodoxy and connect all the dots as to why I believe they're fundamentally different religions and why I believe importing Protestant beliefs, practices, music, literature into our churches is detrimental to our spiritual development as Orthodox. So I think that pretty much covers the three sections of the book.
Okay, perfect. Does anybody have any questions before I ask a question? Okay.
Don't be shy, seriously. You got a question, ask.
Right. I just figured I'd let people go. So in your book, it mentioned specifically that you saw a Coptic church, didn't really know what it was, and then walked in and kind of started that journey. Have you ever thought about what would have happened if you entered another Orthodox church, like a Oriental Orthodox church that's from or Eastern? Would that have really changed things? Or is it like, what specifically about Coptic Orthodoxy really got you? Because, I mean, I'm sure there are elders in every other church as well. They probably do weekday liturgies as well. Just curious.
What struck me, so it was historical studies that pointed me toward wanting to know more about Orthodoxy. And on the side of this huge building in a nearby town, it said Coptic Orthodox Church, but I didn't know what that meant. But it said Sea of Alexandria. And I knew what the Sea of Alexandria was. It was one of the 5 major early seas. And it was the intellectual capital of the world. So that being the case, what is this in order?
It's the, that's, are you seeing submit your questions?
Yeah, you just see us, right? Not something.
We have like a little corner that says submit your questions for those who are online that want to submit their questions.
It's tiny, so, okay.
You wanted to make sure nothing on our end was blocking the camera or something.
No, I can see you both.
So anyway, I figured since this had been the intellectual capital of the world and so many major early Christian developments came from Alexandria, this would be a good place to learn about Orthodoxy while doing historical investigations into what the early Christians believed. And so it just happened that, because it's Sea of Alexandria. Now, during this period, I did avail myself of other Orthodox sources. We visited an Antiochian church. I think a lot of what I read came from the Russians, George Florovsky and Alexander Schmemann. But what the Copts, I think, had that really struck us was the spirit, the flavor, the ethos of early Christianity. And if you think about what those early Christians were, it was a small Middle Eastern persecuted religious minority. Well, does this sound familiar? You guys have on and off maintained that context for the last 2,000 years. And you're very much unchanged in your cultural ethos. So it really just smelled and tasted and felt like what I was reading about early Christianity and reading its early church writings. And beyond that, I would say that as an American and as a 6 foot, 230-pound tattoo sleeve biker American, I have always had what I consider power, quite a bit of power. In person, I have the power to push you back, not take too much stuff off of anybody. I also have civil recourse, where I could, sue a person in court. I have criminal recourse, where I call the police if I need to. We have guns in America, so I can protect my home. So with all that, what the Coptic elders had was this humility of weakness. They had no recourse. You're in Egypt and you get discriminated or attacked. You're probably not going to get much help. And they're just going to whitewash it. And this kind of instills a sense of complete trust in God. And I really believe that the Coptic spirit is summed up in the kissing of both sides of the hand, of accepting things that come, the good and the bad, what we receive, what we don't receive, all as though it came from the hand of God, and living this life in faithful, trusting submission to the will of God. And that is so far the opposite of what I am. It's just ridiculous. So most people pick a church based on what they like, they connect, this connects to them. And I kind of went the other direction and picked the opposite, because I don't need a lot more of what I already have in abundance. Like I'm intellectually oriented. So the Russians have, certainly some of the best scholars. But I don't need more of what I already have as much as I need what I'm lacking. And what I'm lacking was found in the Coptic faith, in their ethos and expression, in the spirit of the older Copts. And so ultimately, I'm here for my salvation. And that means my transformation into the image of Christ. And I really have some weak and blind areas that need to be shored up. And I found that, even in midweek liturgies, the catechesis we went through and the period up until baptism, I was hitting 4 or 5 midweek liturgies a week, and those are all Arabic. And it was just being in the presence of these elders, just being in the room with them when they prayed, there was almost a rubbing off of that spirit, and it just was something that I needed. So when I talk to somebody else, and I've talked many times, been directed by a lot of people to talk to me when they're looking into Orthodoxy, especially people with a Protestant background. So I guess we call theologically bilingual. So I can talk to a Protestant, and when he uses a certain terminology, you wouldn't even know what foundations are under that word that are very different than the foundations when you hear that word. If you hear the word justification or many other terms, you wouldn't know what is under there, and I would. So I've had quite a few of them directed to me and say, hey, can you talk to this guy? And I'll spend many hours talking with them. And there's really an assessment period of which orthodoxy is best for you and your salvation individually. Some people, it's too culturally alienating. And I get that. And that's fine. I mean, I don't like, I like that I see some movement towards a more missional attitude in some of the Coptic parishes. I don't like when it becomes this convert trophy idea. Like, oh, look, we've got this white person that converted. Like, my goal when I talk to people is never to bring them into the Coptic church. It's to connect them to Christ, wherever that's going to happen for them, in whichever jurisdiction. So more often than not, they end up over in the Antiochian church, which is much more American convert friendly and has a lot more American converts and connects with them where they can fit in socially and connect with the people. And that's fine. I mean, it's all about connecting to Christ, not to, gain trophies on a shelf. Look at the converts we have. So for me, Coptic orthodoxy is what I need to be saved. But for somebody else, the barriers may be too much. The walls may be too high. It is a closed-in community. And I don't know if you guys have any converts in your parish, particularly Protestant converts, but ask them if anybody's ever invited them over a high feast for Christmas feast or Easter feast. And you have these people whose calendar doesn't match ours, and then they get off of that long period of fasting and preparation, and now they've reached the feast season, and then they go home alone because their families aren't part of this. And ask yourself, does anybody invite them to their Coptic home with their Coptic friends and family to celebrate this? And if the answer is no, that's a real issue for people who desire some kind of social connection with the people in the church. So this isn't for everybody, at least not at this point, in my opinion. Anastasia? Why did you Coptic Orthodox?
Was that a response to your question? What if he had shown up to another jurisdiction?
I mean, that was a great answer. It was just, I was curious for the both of you, of course. So, can I ask you the same question? Why Coptic? Like, if you could, you were able to obviously convert to any of the early churches. Why did you land on Coptic? Just curious.
I don't know if mine was intentional to Thilo's. I was following about two steps behind him in the whole process. So, and again, we didn't come to the steps of the Orthodox Church to convert by any means, not at all. Like you said, he was doing some research, some study, saw the Alexandria, wanted to go just check it out and maybe learn some things. So I literally came the week after him, and it's very foreign. And that's not just the people, that's the practices, the music, the culture, everything is foreign. And so I don't think that I chose Coptic, but I did fall in love with the Copts. So I mean, how can I not fall in love when you have this, biker guy that's, Mr. Social Distance, you stay there and I stay here, and then he's on a full pew that is entirely empty besides him and one uncle who then slides over and puts his hand on Thilo's thigh. And then watching him cringe 100 times over, going, "Who is this man? Why does he have my hand on his my leg?" So that's fun. But I can say that over time, there were little things for me, like things like that, like attending the college group and seeing the guys, and they'd be like leaning on each other like this, during the teaching. And you don't see that in our culture with the Caucasian culture. It's part of the Egyptian culture. And then there was one deacon at the time who was a priest now that just adored Thilo, and he would grab him and he would like kiss him, on the cheeks and hug him, and I love you. And I saw the scriptures come to life. I saw St. Paul on the shore and the people begging him not to leave and falling on his neck, weeping. And saying, why are you breaking my heart? I have to leave. I was actually seeing it. And there's so much about the Coptic culture that made the scriptures come to life. It just even the unspoken things. Let's not to go on, but let's say like the prodigal son. And how the younger son leaves, and as he's leaving, the older son like, holla, we still good? Okay. But you know in your culture that if your father's heart is being broken and you care anything, forget about your brother. Like you don't care anything about him if he leaves. But this is ripping your father's heart out. You'll go chasing after your brother. Don't do this. Don't do this to Baba. You're gonna kill him, right? So the older son doesn't do that. And this is something again that's in your culture, not in my culture. And so it just eventually, I just absolutely fell in love with Copts and with the Coptic culture. And so after that, I wouldn't choose anything else. But yes, Antiochian or something that was more familiar to me. If I was to choose in the beginning, if I could have told Thilo I would rather go there, then I would have done that. But this is where God brought us, and I'm grateful.
Near us, there is an Antiochian parish that's huge, and it's almost all converts. And the priest is Father Josiah Trenum. Very well-known priest. And we went there for a baptism, and huge amount of white converts. And it was such a reverence and respect in that place that you knew you were walking into God's house in a holy, sacred place. But it didn't feel like you were walking into your home.
It was militant.
Yeah, very rigid.
Oh my goodness! The one of the people being baptized was this little girl that was probably about 4, 5 years old, and she was having a fit. She was not having it, not excited about being baptized. And some of the people started cracking up. She's like, I don't want it. It was kind of comical. So some of the people started laughing, and then the priest just like laid into everybody, and this is a baptism and you don't laugh. And I just know I've seen abunas, abunas are warm and it's a family and they're not so militant.
Once you can, and this is what I tell people, if you're able to pierce through that cultural veil, there's an amazing warmth and beauty and love in there. But not everybody can, and to be honest, I didn't expect to connect with the people. And that wasn't a real big deal to me because I was there. I knew God was there, and that was all I was there for. And I knew that these elders had this spirit on them that if I was around it, some of it would rub off on me. And that was enough. Like that's fine. I'm good. And so I'd attend midweek liturgies a lot, and, with all the older Copts, and, when I do a Matanya, I'd look around like, yeah, did you see that? But No, honestly, what you do when you're in my position is you just look at the floor. You keep your head down. You're not there walking in grinning like a dumb American going, hey, everybody, I'm here. Aren't you happy? No, you walk in, humbly put your head down and go pray. And so I had this desire just to absorb it. But then after a couple of years, and I don't know whether it was maybe hearing from their grandkids how I give talks and help them to appreciate the Coptic faith more, or if it was from seeing me at all the midweek liturgies. But those old Egyptian women that don't smile at anyone? Like, they don't even smile at each other. They certainly don't smile at their husband. They don't smile at anyone. They started smiling at me. I mean, I'm riding up on a Harley Davidson wearing a T-shirt and jeans. And after liturgy, they were smiling at me. And I'll be honest, it was shocking. I didn't expect it. It's not what I was there for. But it was really a wonderful thing. And we both noticed in the last 10 years since we've been here, it's changed quite a bit in our diocese. Parishes are more welcoming and friendly to outsiders than they used to be. And it's not to bash the elder Copts for being suspicious of outsiders. They come from Egypt. And the odds of an outsider being there to do you harm are pretty good. So I don't blame them at all for being that way. But being able to pierce through that veil and to be accepted and loved and welcomed was a nice bonus that I wasn't expecting.
Hi, Thilo and Anastasia. It's Marianne here. Thank you so much for being with us. Many of us also love Father Joseph and Claudine, so I'm a little jealous that you're going to get to do Holy Week with them. But my question is, thank you so much for sharing about like your love for the Coptic Orthodox Church. I would love to know a little bit more about just your journey to becoming a Christian. So you had mentioned that you started off Mormon, and Anastasia, I don't know about your background, but I'd love to just hear a little bit about just your journey to Christ in general, if you don't mind sharing that.
You should buy the book, because if I tell you, I'm not going to make any money.
Oh, can you give us a teaser? Maybe just give us a little teaser. And I'm also curious about what parish you go to right now, what the name of the parish is.
We're at St. Mary and St. Verena. So we started off with Father Daniel at St. John, and he did our catechesis, brought us in, and then he went back to New Jersey to do his PhD. And being Americans, we were very accustomed to your father abandoning you. So that was fine. And I'm kidding, okay. Although, yeah, I'm kind of not kidding, but sort of kidding. So anyway, we would kind of visit some other parishes, and then they'd asked us to come and give a talk to their college kids. And so we went to this parish, and when we went in, it was heavily ethnically Egyptian, but also one of the warmest, most friendly and welcoming parishes. It was like they had both. It was really shocking. And we just kind of looked at each other after the meeting and said, gosh, that just felt like home. And Anastasia said, yeah, it sure did. And we just kind of both knew inwardly this is where we belong as our home parish. However, I do pray at other parishes, because that parish is like a half hour away. We have one that's 5 minutes away. I have others that are 10 or 15 minutes away. We have parishes everywhere. So midweek, I tend to go to other parishes. So I love different groups of Copts. There's one over with Father Bishoy Brownfield that I love going to. But that's why we chose that one as our home. The first part of the question. Oh, the background. Yeah. So going from Mormonism to atheism is pretty common. It's funny because when I was on debate forums, it was like the segue from Mormonism is never to actual Christianity. It's always to atheism. There's a presumption that what you've been given was a version of Christianity. Mm-hmm. And so, well, I'm done with Christianity, obviously, because I'm leaving Mormonism. And then it was largely grounded in pain and torment and resentment of this world that I became atheist. I kind of became what I tongue-in-cheek refer to as a God-hating atheist, which is, I mean, if you get the irony there, if you believe there's no God, why would you hate him? But that's kind of where I was. And it was when I met a man and we sat and talked that I had those problems kind of addressed enough that I was no longer blaming God for the torment and suffering, that I was able to now sit down and hear kind of the story of Christ in the evangelical version of it. And in many ways, it's the same. In other ways, it's completely lacking, as I would understand as an orthodoxy now. But that's what took me into evangelical Christianity. And I never even really went to a church. It was just with this neighbor guy. And then after some time, that fell apart. And I was not practicing, but I always completely believed it was true. And then sometime later, through catastrophe in my life, I decided I needed to plug into a church. And that's when I kind of entered the service portion and became a usher and then a service coordinator and seating coordinator for a very large nationally televised church. And then broke off from there to a couple smaller churches before encountering history and setting out a methodology by which I would view history took me to orthodoxy. I guess, does that answer enough, or do you want more detail?
That's a great teaser to convict anybody who's on the fence about getting the book. So thank you so much for sharing that. Anastasia, how about you?
Literally right around the corner from a little Protestant church.
We can't hear you, actually. Sorry.
You can't hear. Can you hear him?
We could hear him, and we can hear you a little bit more now. Maybe it's just getting a little
Okay,
closer.
well,
Yeah,
I'll lean-
that's
oh, there's the
perfect.
microphone.
Thanks.
Okay, so I grew up in a time and place that you could send your 5-year-old down the street and around the corner safely. And there was a little Protestant church that was right around the corner from where we live. And so my family would send me there to kind of get a 5-year-old out of their hair, go make some macaroni crosses, be gone for a little while. And so I just enjoyed always going to church and made friends there. And I took it seriously. My family was not religious though. And I was always the girl that was involved in all of the things in church and carrying my Bible around and, at school and all of those things. So just always very active, if that makes sense. And then kind of our stories merge along the lines where he was talking about being at a large evangelical church. So yeah, I've always kind of followed the Lord.
It's beautiful, very spirit-led. Thank you so much for
Thank-
sharing.
thank
Can I
God.
ask one more? And I'm just so curious, how did your paths cross with Father Joseph and Claudine?
Oh, Atlanta. This story for me is during COVID, there was some online classes with Abuna Kyrillos, Murad, and Abuna Anthony Murad, and Abuna Joseph. And it was on the Passions, and it was, oh my gosh, it was so good. My friend Monica had told me about it, and so I was tuning in, and it was incredible. And this Abuna Joseph, just like, he had the best sense of humor, but he was very sweet, but he was also very direct. Like, he knew his stuff. And I was going through a challenge like a little, like about a month or two after that, I was going through like a serious challenge, and my friend Monica's like, well, why don't you text Abuna? I had never spoken to him or anything, right? And she's like, why don't you text Abuna? And I'm like, I couldn't do that. In my mind, he's this rock star that I've been listening to on these studies, like, oh my gosh, like, no, I could never. She's like, no, reach out to him. And so I did. And his advice to me, like, first of all, he doesn't know me from anybody. He gave me a bunch of time, of his time, some very loving advice, and was staying in touch with me. So then I tell Thilo about this, St. Joseph Daoud, and he's like, oh yeah, we met him when we were in Canada and we did that talk with the youth. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, he was there. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I was in this man's presence and I didn't even know it.
I got pictures of my phone with me, with him and Abuna Anthony and Abuna Kyrillos and Abuna Gabriel Wisa. There's pictures of us together. Like, how do you not remember?
Oh my gosh. I was dying 1,000 deaths because, whoever there knows him and knows Claudine, it's like how precious it is to get to hang out with him. And it's like, I can't believe I was actually there with him and had no idea. But
it's beautiful.
So he ended up being her father of confession. And then a little while back, I got permission from my priest, and he's mine as well. So we had kind of talked about a plan to go visit him in the Holy 50 Days with Emmanuel and Monica Gerges. Emmanuel's my godfather. He's the theologian. But then, I talked to Anastasia the other night and said, we won't be spending as much time visiting, but what do you think about going there for Holy Week? And she said she would love to. So we worked it out, and that's where we're going to be for Holy Week this year, God willing.
God willing, yeah.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing. And I'm sure you are as much a blessing to them as you feel that they are to you.
Well, wait till you read the book. You'll see that the common response I've been hearing about the book is that people are reading it in anywhere from 1 sitting to 2 days, and they're finding it quite compelling and engaging. And I kind of think it's like the same reason we slow down and stare when there's a wreck on the highway. You just can't look away. So what he inherited was not that great. He inherited a lot of problems when he accepted us.
Hi. Just wondering, what do you think for either of you there was one moment where both of you, I'm sure, took on like this journey of researching and getting to know the Orthodox faith before it became your own? At what point did the spirituality that you were learning and the life of prayer, the life of partaking of God's divinity, at what point did that become your own? Like, was there at any point in time a realization where, or could you at any point like pinpoint like a time where something clicked, or just a question? Yeah.
For me, I am very 12 years in now. I'm very early in the process of making it my own. And I mean that honestly. It's such a slow movement to embrace this and to make it a part of your life. And I consider myself early in that process. But during the time of investigating, studying history, and attending the liturgies, the experiential aspects I kept on a shelf. So nobody, when somebody says that they're not biased, I'm kind of done with the discussion, because if you don't realize how biased you are, you have no chance of us having an honest discussion. about anything. So I, being aware of my biases, I put forth kind of a methodology that I figured would be the most honest way to address the questions before I started looking at the data. Then I start looking at the data through the lens of that methodology. But I'm attending liturgy, so these experiences are kind of happening, but I keep putting them on a shelf. And I say, I'll come back to those. Because I will tell you this in the book. First time I walked up to that Coptic church, I met Father Daniel on the steps. Being an American, I didn't know better, and I actually showed up early. And I was waiting for him. And so I told him what I was there to do, and he said, well, stick around a while and see how you like it. And I told him how I like it has nothing to do with anything. If I absolutely love it and it's not true, I'm going to leave. And if I hate it and it is true, I have to conform to it. But I'm not here shopping for, a new pair of shoes. I'm looking for truth. So with that being the case, now I'm investigating, looking into this. I'm trying not to let any experiences blind what objectivity I was able to bring to the table as best I could. And so everything just kind of went on a shelf until I hit the point that I said, yes, this is definitely true and the proper, authentic reflection of Christianity. Then I could pull all that back off the shelf and incorporate it. So there were many points of experience along the first week, Anastasia was like, after my first liturgy, noticing how different I was. And after the first couple of weeks, all my employees were noticing how different I was. I wasn't screaming at everybody, dropping F-bombs at them half the time, chewing them out 4 times a day. And I didn't even know any of this was happening. But then it was like, okay, put that on a shelf. When it was pointed out to me, it's like, okay, put that on the shelf. And so once I had determined that this was truth, then I was able to pull those things back off the shelf and start understanding them in that light.
So if I could restate your question to make sure that I have it, you wanted to know when if there was a moment when basically this faith became ours and the beauty of it and all of that. Did I understand the question correctly?
Yeah. Like if there was a moment of realization, or if there was like whether like perhaps you're struggling with accepting something and it clicked or something where or something where perhaps a misconception of God was broken down or a spiritual longing was fulfilled or
Yeah. That is an amazing question. And it's so multifaceted. So to synopsize it, I would break it up for myself into 2 phases. And one would be learning the Orthodox/Coptic Orthodox theology. And so much of it is literally the exact opposite of Protestant evangelicalism. And so there was learning these things, there was unlearning things, there was struggling, there was wrestling, there was fear. Because if something's the exact opposite, it's either really, really wrong or it's 100% right. And what I'm practicing already is really, really wrong. There's not much of a gray area. So that was tough. Then in that same phase, I'd say, as I came into Coptic Orthodoxy, Thilo and I realized even in the process that some things would click. We would have a moment that like, oh, I get this. And other things seeped in slowly. Now that's my experience of making the theology my own, through study, through research, through learning, through struggle. all of that. Then again, some years ago, I was in a personal crisis, like I mentioned, and had internally lost about everything. Now that's catharsis, that's emptying. And that's when, by God's grace, I encountered Abuna Joseph. And I started to meet the beloved. I started to meet Christ. Now, married that with all of the theology of the Coptic Church, this exact opposite, where I'm learning that God the Father does not hate me, and God the Son had to step between me and God the Father killing me. Learning that I'm not totally depraved, and that I'm rotten to the core by nature, and it's only by salvation that there's anything good about me. It's like these are things that I have been taught, where Coptic Orthodoxy is the opposite. And having this displayed through Abuna Joseph and hearing him talk all the time about your belovedness, all the time. And if we understood how much the Lord loves us, that certain things wouldn't even be a struggle. That's when I would say the Lord and the theology began to take me instead of me taking it. Do you see the difference? In the first half, I was doing as I had always done. I was grasping, I was taking, I was the one in control. Then I hit this point where I had no control. I was entirely empty. And then that's when he came and started filling me, and that theology is being made full. And that's really, I think, the right way and the better way. But God in his patience allows us the whole journey. He doesn't get impatient with us. Was that responsive to your question? Was that coherent? Okay.
On the intellectual side of it all, seeking, what was properly Christian, early on in the process, we encountered, applying this methodology to the data, some information that would no longer allow us to remain Protestant. So we were now cut off from where we came from. Then there were some other questions where the methodology couldn't get us to the answer. And there was no way to get to that answer, in my view, through historical research. And we couldn't go forward to orthodoxy. And so this prolonged period in the middle of it all, we were waking up many mornings in horror. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever woken up in terror, like just in horror, but that's what it was. And it was happening to us a lot. Like, we had become apostates, and really, I mean, you guys are in a faith where you were baptized when you were babies. Us, we're honestly out there digging and trying and applying and really wanting to follow the truth wherever it is. And now we're left with nothing. And we can't go either direction. And it was a horrible and tormenting time. And it was only when I was able to settle those other matters that there was, I'm not going to ruin it in the book, there was a moment when I was sitting down with Abuna Bishoy Brownfield, and it was a few words he said in response to a question, couple of very short sentences, and it was like everything just cascaded and flooded into place. And now I was able to see the church. And that was the moment when everything just aligned. And in my view, that's when I became Orthodox in my heart. And there are people that I've encountered where I've like talked to Abuna and, my other Abuna from before and said, somebody who's baptized. And I said, that person still isn't Orthodox. And he was like, be careful what you, and I'm like, I'm not saying they're not part of the church. They're not being saved. They're not baptized. None of that. I'm saying in their heart and their mind, they're still not Orthodox because they're not thinking the Orthodox way. And the Orthodox way, in my view, is that when any question arises, any need for guidance in whatever way, in what to believe, any question about what's true or what to do, if you're Orthodox in your heart and mind, you ask, what has the church said? And I'm not talking about the church now or the Coptic church under Pope Shenouda or even just the Coptic church. I'm looking for what has the church everywhere the apostles established it for the last 2,000 years. What have they said about this? Because that's my starting place for finding what's true. And I think most people, honestly, believe what they like believing, what they hear that makes them feel good, what they want to be true. And I think that's the case with most people's religious beliefs. It's like a buffet court. And I like some of this and I like some of that. And it's based on how do I like it? Well, I had an expectation right from the beginning that there would be a lot of things I would find out about truth and God that I wasn't going to like. Because I'm fallen and broken, it shouldn't surprise me when I hear a lot of stuff I didn't want to hear.
On that note, I actually have a question that is related to what you literally just said. I think, I have to write this down because I think it's such a complicated question. So I've been like writing it down for half an hour. I think a struggle that a lot of youth in the Orthodox Church, or specifically the Coptic Orthodox Church, because that's my experience, have this idea of the difficulty to be in this church because of the strictness. And that's usually the word that I hear when, I mention to colleagues that I'm fasting. Because, not because I'm going around parading it, but because they're like, why are you eating tuna every single day? Like, getting these comments from people. And so I find that, as a servant serving youth, like high school youth, we get these questions all the time. Why are we always fasting? Why is our Mass 3 hours long? Why are there so many strict, guidelines that we're sort of forced into in order to be part of this community? And so you talked a lot about the community and how that is what brought you to the Coptic Orthodox Church. But how did you reconcile, and what would you say to youth that struggle with this idea of, well, I believe in God, why do I have to do all of these and list of strict, quote unquote, strict things that the church guides us to do? And I mean, I have my answer that I give them, but it's, coming from an evangelical background where maybe things are not as strict, or maybe they are, depending on denomination. I don't know where I must confess I didn't read the book, but I will because I'm interested in this kind of thing. So, sorry, the long-winded question, what would you say to those people that were babies baptized in this church, grew up in this church, but are struggling with this sense of, okay, well, I guess I believe, but why do I have to do all of these things in order to be a part of this community?
I'd be curious. Do you mind starting with? I'd be curious to know how you respond. What do you say?
Similar to what Thilo was saying earlier, like this idea of truth and not always being in your comfort zone is one thing. But I think the way I usually answer it is that we're not of this world, right? That we're sojourners in this place, just like we say in the liturgy, right? We're not meant for this world, so why are we trying to get to the comfort of this world? And everything that the church has given us and every guideline it's given us is in order to bring us closer to him, because he is our goal and he is our love and he is our joy. But it's really hard to say that to a 15-year-old girl that's like, why do I have to do X, Y, Z? So, but that's coming from a perspective of, years of my own personal spiritual growth and understanding that and appreciating that now. But, youth in this church are the future, as Pope Shenouda, would say, but we're losing them because of this idea of, quote unquote, being strict. And so, having somebody who has not grown up in this church and then still appreciates this idea of, quote unquote strict, how do you reconcile that with people?
I totally agree with your answer. When you stated the question, you said something that I've heard a lot of times already, in that, well, I already love God, I already love Jesus, I'm already going to heaven, whatever, fill it in already, ... So why all this other stuff? That is Protestant theology that has seeped in, and it seeps in through lots of ways, and I won't go on a rabbit trail like that, but when we harmlessly listen to Protestant music, Protestant teachings, whatever, we don't realize what's seeping in. And that mindset is very transactional. I've been baptized, I know God, I love Jesus, I'm going to heaven. There's nothing else to do, right? The transactions happened, it's complete. So what you were saying is that this isn't about a transaction, it's about our beloved. And it's about when we were in the garden and we used to receive everything with thanksgiving. We used to walk with him in the cool of the day. Everything was received with him, through him, and given back to him. And then through the deceit of the serpent, we wanted to take something apart from him. And that is what we continue to do in our sickness and our sin sickness. And we take in relationships, we take in our food, we just consume for ourselves. And that needs to be healed. So that's like, it's not all, Thilo always says, it's not all about you, Habibi, And when we stand for long times in prayer and we put ourselves aside, that's an emptying so that we can be filled. It's when we make friends with hunger and we receive things, we receive food with thanksgiving. And especially hunger for the bread of life and not McDonald's, or a steak. It's a whole healing process. Like, it's not a transaction. So there's a lot that God has given us to heal. And the more that we're healed, the more we become like him. And the more we become like him, the more we understand him and know him and his ridiculous, ludicrous love for us and others, which makes us grow more. But it's a process. Would that be something that you could even explain to somebody?
I love that. You're speaking to youth that are self-centered, right? So to tell them you're self-centered is to be like every other adult that they see. So I agree with you 150%, and I've said these things to them, right? Not in so many words. I've definitely done my best, but I just find that that's where they find, as you said earlier too, like they find comfort in, like they find what they like about this. They like that, it's a 40-minute lecture and it's not standing the whole time. They like that it's, upbeat songs and this is not working.
Okay.
Yeah, anyways, continue, please. Thank you.
I a couple of levels I want to talk about this, but the first one is your challenge is how do I get this through to them? And go ahead and give her the mic and let her hold it because we might have dialogue. So you're approaching this as what I call a marketing problem. So how do I sell this? But the problem isn't marketing, it's the product. We have a bad product. If you look front center in the church, it's not Jesus Christ on a lounge chair with a pina colada. It's Jesus Christ hanging on a cross. What you're selling is self-death and self-emptying. If you're trying to find a way to make that an appealing product, good luck. I don't know how you're going to do that because it's not a good product to sell. You got people on every corner. Certainly, obtaining this wonderful emotional experience in 3 songs at the evangelical church is a much better product for self-centered people and for self-absorbed people. So you can't sell this product to them if there's a better product down the street. You're just not going to do it. So I would start with their mode of asking, why do I have to do this? Well, what is that question based upon? It's based upon an idea that I think it's wrong that I should have to do this. Okay, there's a proposition. I think this is wrong that I should have to do all this to get together with God. Okay, and where did that supposition come from? What was the basis of that claim and that belief? And the basis is because I don't like it. Okay. You don't like it. And that's the basis of thinking it must not be right because I don't like it. Well, I'm not even going to address that question. I want to get to the issue of whether the voice of the church is the voice of God. Because if you believe the voice of the church of 2,000 years is the voice of God as expressed through the Holy Spirit in the communities where the Spirit has united to humanity according to the incarnation of Jesus Christ, then the question becomes, I want to understand the reasons and the ways that the church has handed down for us doing these things. But you're coming as one who has the presumption up front that it's true, objectively true. Not I like it, I don't like it, but if this has been the voice of 2,000 years of everybody where the Spirit has dwelled, and suddenly these new voices pop up that oppose that voice, either the Spirit hasn't been present in 2,000 years, or those new voices are just wrong. So it starts to me always with the objective truth. And that would be that this is the voice of the Spirit, the voice of the church. Now, if you want to sit at the feet of the church as her child and ask the question, teach me, teach me, Mama, teach me, Mother Church. Why is it we do these things? And what am I supposed to experience? And if I don't, what am I doing wrong? You're coming as a child sitting in front of her. When we were inquiring, we stood over the church as judges. And I tell people, you need to do that if you're looking into this, because you're talking about giving your eternal well-being and your heart and your soul over to something. And you better be really critical and skeptical. You better stand over it as a judge and really test it before you hand yourself over to it. And that's good. It's as it should be. But you're not ready for baptism until you've come to the conclusion that this is the voice of the Spirit. This is the voice of God. And now I'm getting off of my place of judging her and taking my place at her feet as her child and her student. So once you're in that place, now we can ask that same question with a completely different attitude and start handing her books on asceticism and on the fathers and asceticism, on modern theological books that synopsize why we do these things and what asceticism does to us and what it means. And I find modern authors can be better in encapsulating all of the ideas of the fathers together in a more digestible form. So that's great. But if you're looking for how to make this appealing, how to make a cross appealing to a narcissistic person, I got no idea how you're going to do that. And I don't know why there's a presumption that if you're born an Egyptian into a Coptic home, that you have some kind of a birthright to salvation anyway. You still have to be converted just like I did, just like she did. Everybody needs to be converted. I don't care who you are. There's no birthright to this. The Jews tried that. Remember with Jesus? We're the children of Abraham. And Jesus said, that ain't going to get you there. Oh, yeah, well, we do all the practices. We do the law. We take communion. We do the fast. We do whatever. And he said, that ain't going to do it for you. You have to have your heart turned to God. I mean, this was the Reformation in the West was a pendulum swing from one extreme to the other, which was just as wrong as where it started. And yes, in these older churches, you have a number of people who presume upon inheritance or following rules as being enough. So my association corporately with the church is, wow, I'm going to get saved, without attention to the individual participation and giving of your heart and your life to him in personal relationship. So what do you have? The pendulum now swings all the way the other way. The church, the sacraments, all of that, the structure is all rejected in favor of all personal. Everything is the hyper-personal. Do you think it's a coincidence that born out of that comes a person with a guitar and some singers and some lights and smoke machines that are singing about Jesus like they're trying to seduce him? Like, you know, this is my boyfriend. There's no coincidence that when you hyper-personalized it, now it became romantic and you've lost all the aspects of the church. But the truth is there in between those two. It's in the personal individual as being guided by a spiritual guide, and it's in the corporate. We're saved together in community. It's bringing those together that's the proper Christian faith. So yes, I understand people can look at the one end and say that's not it, and then go all the way to the other end, but that's not it either. It's over here in the middle where you're bringing those two together. I think for people who are self-absorbed narcissists like our society produces, you know, the Coptic Church for 2,000 years has suffered every kind of test you can think of except one. And that's prosperity and well-being. You've never faced that test before. And now in the West, that test is in full force. And a lot of you ain't doing so well. But honestly, that's the same test the Jews went through, right? They would all be in captivity and thanking God and seeking him and fasting and praying and until they got brought to the promised land, back to their inheritance. And the next generation and the one after, everything got very comfortable. And they started turning to the religions of their neighbors, which looked much more interesting and titillating. And, you know, okay, this is a common story. It's actually well-being and prosperity that's more dangerous to the Christian than persecution and suffering. And so now you're in that context and you say, how is it I can get this through to them? It ain't up to you. You ain't gonna have some magic words that are gonna pierce through that heart of selfishness and self-absorption. But what you can do is pray for them. And I don't mean that lightly. And when you do pray for them, prepare yourself that what you may well be inviting is for disaster and tragedy to come into their lives. Because that's more often than not what drives a person to the arms of God. And there are people extremely close to me that I pray for. And I'm wincing as I pray because I know this is very possibly the path that could take. And ultimately, what good is it to gain the whole world and save your soul? So if it takes catastrophe, lose your soul. So if it takes catastrophe, okay, then it's better than the eternal catastrophe. So I wish I had a better answer, but honestly, you're trying to sell somebody a product they don't want. And which I just would kind of maintain a friendship and a relationship and a good rapport with the people. So if that day of catastrophe comes, they might look at it and say, you know, she's been a good friend and I need God and she's close to God. I'm going to go talk to her about how to seek God in the midst of this. And then on that day, her ears may be open and she's ready to listen.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. That was a great answer. Thank you.
I have one question from the online questions. Can you tell us about your experience with Mormonism? What made you feel disconnected from it?
They're some of the most wonderful people I've ever met. They, my gosh, my mom had several mental breakdowns, was institutionalized, single mom with 3 kids. And the Mormons were infinitely good to her, good to our family. They have food production facilities in Utah, and none of their people are hungry. They'll feed them. If they're hungry, they produce their own food. They have the women's programs to help train the younger women in how to be a wife. Just have family home evening every Monday night. Everything gets shut off and the family is together doing spiritual lesson. So they're wonderful people. But there's the theology, there's more about this in the book if you want to read it, but the theology was just a little too convoluted and didn't match my observations of reality. And I didn't know nearly as much about how wrong it was then, but that was enough. And it was getting kind of near the time to go on a mission. So I was like maybe 16 or so. And it was only a few years till the mission where they send you away for 2 years. And I was already smoking weed around the clock and, you know, not living a Mormon life. And so I just walked away from it and said, no, this can't be true. It's just the theology's too. I figured the truth when I found it would make sense of everything I see around me. And it certainly didn't. And when I encountered evangelicalism, it did a much better job of that.
All right, could we give them a round of applause?
No, I'm serious.
Give
Please
them-
don't.
Can we give them
Please
2
don't.
rounds of applause?
No, I don't mean this like in the Coptic way. I mean, like, seriously, that bothers me. Like,
Right.
it's all glory to God. If anything good happens, it's from God.
Right.
And anything that we have, I tell people, if you want to thank somebody, go call your teta, go call your taunt, you know, the people that preserve this faith, because anything I'm bringing to you, I got from them.
Right. Well, we truly appreciate your time, both of you, of course. If anybody would like some knowledge of how to get a copy of the book, it's on the email, or you could just come up to me and ask. We're also working on getting them at a few Orthodox bookstores here. So I'll be in touch with I think it's Agora. Right, awesome. And if you guys can lead us into prayers, that'd be awesome.
In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, one God, we make some of have mercy and have mercy. Lord, thank you for this time, for these people, for your truth, for our belovedness. I pray that you cover them, that you draw near to them in this time of fasting, and that you fill us all with you during this season. We look forward to the resurrection. Through the intercessions of Saint Mary and all your saints, hear us as we pray thankfully.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from evil, and in Christ Jesus our Lord. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory, forever. Amen. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you. You guys were
Stay warm.
great, great exchange and great questions. Thank you all.
All right.
So,
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
So
We're all
next
saying
week
thank you.
we have Marianne. She's actually with us here today, to help us with a writing workshop. It's Our Writing Story. I think that was the working title, right? Right. Sweet. Right. Yeah. Right. And if you guys look in the email, there's also a link for a talk from Father Bishoy tomorrow via Zoom. Just check your emails. You'll see it there. All right. Awesome.
Hello, friends. Sorry, just another very, very quick announcement, just so that everybody knows. Next Sunday are actually the SMSV board elections. We actually have a few of our crew members running, so make sure you check the list of names and vote. Go, Christine.